Hello there, Iowa Cattlemen. This is Katie Altoff. I am the Communications and Membership Director for the Iowa Cattlemen's Association. It is about 2 o'clock on Tuesday, March 24th, 2020, and I am joined here today with ICA CEO Matt Deppy. We're going to go over what has been happening with COVID-19, how that has been affecting the cattle industry, and some of the things that we have been working on behalf of our members. So, Matt, thanks for joining us here today and doing this little audio update. We all know that in the past week or so, we've seen a lot of impacts from COVID-19 on the cattle industry. One of our priorities here at ICA has been to make sure that our cattle producers are included in any sort of a stimulus package that might come out. Can you elaborate a little bit on what we're looking for in that stimulus package and what we need to do to get that done?
Yeah, exactly. And I do think in a very fluid situation, it's all about the priorities and sometimes the way in which the priorities come forward. So let's talk a little bit about the disaster package that we're looking for. First of all, I think it's really important to note that the cattle industry typically does not look for direct payments following disasters like this market or other instances. We do have the livestock indemnity program, but we've never been included in things like the market facilitation program. So this is monumental. It gives you a sense of how big the issue is. But when we look at the last couple weeks and the way that the divergence happened between the price of the cutout, so the box beef price and the beef demand there, and how that spiked up very quickly, and then we counter that and parallel that to what live cattle prices did, or even the futures contract did, which was spiked downward. There's some issues at bay. There are things of which our producers could not prepare for that connect to the COVID-19 situation. And so what we're doing right now is we're working with the Senate and other national organizations to procure the next stimulus package. It'll be stimulus number 3, about $1.8 to $2 trillion. And with it in that discussion is around $50 billion that is going to be used through the Commodity Credit Corporation. That's the function, that's the bank of which USDA has a borrowing authority to help producers be whole, to help agriculture be whole in times of stress like this that are cataclysmic, pandemic, however you want to describe them. So right now we're waiting and pushing really hard with the Senate at this point to get that stimulus 3 package through the proper channels.
Okay, so yeah, like you said, pushing on the Senate, we'd encourage our members to contact their senators and make sure that we have that borrowing authority for the Commodities Credit Corporation increased so that they have the ability to help out our cattle producers. Now, some people, like you said, we don't usually take part in that in the cattle industry. We don't usually ask for any sort of indemnity or something like this. And some people have said that that is sort of a band-aid over this situation. And what we need to be looking for is a cure to these issues in the cattle market, in cattle marketing. And I know you know that that's something we have been working on for quite some time, but share with our listeners what ICA has been doing to try to work on cattle marketing transparency longer term so that hopefully we don't have such a big divergence when we do have these black swan type events.
Right. So the Iowa Cattlemen's Association has absolutely been involved in the price discovery discussion for many more years than some other state organizations across the country, at least 10 years, because we've been talking this direction since I started 10 years ago. But when it comes to price discovery and you look at the types of fed cattle transactions, especially, which the fed cattle market is realistically the most impactful price opportunity, price discovery market when you look at live cattle sales. But when you look at that in Iowa and Nebraska, in the north, so to speak, of the beef belt, we do a really good job of balancing what we would call negotiated trades. So those are those spot or cash trades. The procurement team comes to your place, bids in the beef or live a base price, and those signals go directly to the various reporting mechanisms within the market. In the southern part of the beef belt, producers on that side of the fed cattle trade typically have a business to business, or what we would call or refer to as an alternative marketing arrangement with a packer buyer. And so, yes, there's a base price, but there's specific premiums and discounts that aren't necessarily transition and transparent to the rest of the industry. So it's really hard to get a sense of what's a 13 to 1,350 pound fed steer in Texas. Truly, what's the par value of that steer versus whether there's premiums or discounts in that pricing mechanism. So where does that get us? What happens? Well, what you're seeing right now is our total negotiated trade as a percentage of trade, that transparent price discovery mechanism, is about 20 to 25% for the last several years. Now, most recently, yes, it spiked up because we have a challenge in the marketing system. But when that challenge comes on, um, not having as much transparency makes us susceptible on the fed cattle pricing side of things to following different pricing mechanisms. And in this case, while the boxes spiked upward and we would expect those live cattle to follow that demand curve, our live cattle prices really came from the live cattle futures contract. And which everyone truly knows it's an important risk management tool, but certainly in times of stress like this, it follows other markets outside the cattle industry.
Right. So our goal is that fed cattle prices do align more closely with those box cutout prices, not as closely with, like you said, Wall Street, other markets, and things like that, right? And the idea is that more cash negotiated trade across the country would provide better price discovery and help those two align better.
Yeah, I'd agree with that wholeheartedly. And I think when we preface this really fluid situation, lots of disaster and challenge talk right now, two separate type topics, but one that needs to continue to work forward because when we come up to a black swan event, regardless if price goes down or up in the countryside for live cattle, we want to take that volatility out of the market. And this having a more transparent actual market takes volatility out of the futures trade. It also takes volatility out of our live cattle price trade. To go further than that, if you're wondering if ICA has been getting these phone calls related to this topic, we absolutely have. And we've been engaging not only with NCBA, but other national and state organizations across the country to get after this as soon as we can.
Absolutely. It's been encouraging, I think, to see beef flying off the shelves as people stock up for their social isolation or social distancing. I think it's really important that our listeners understand that we want to make sure that cattle producers benefit from that short-term increase in demand that we have seen right now in our retail stores. A couple other questions, things that I know are on people's minds. So the entire beef supply chain, from our cow calf producers and their veterinary services to livestock auction markets to processors. We need to make sure that those are all running as normally as possible in this time, while, of course, working to also decrease the spread of COVID-19 and end this pandemic as soon as possible. Let's start with the vets and the livestock auction markets. What has ICA been doing or been engaged on those topics to make sure that our producers can continue to operate as normally as possible?
So, from a continuity of business is really what we're talking about here. When we think about the animal health side and the importance of those local veterinarians in our operations, so whether that's emergency or consultative standpoint, very very important. Value added propositions, right and left, and certainly we want to do the right thing in terms of medical procedures, but more importantly, when it comes to using pharmaceutical type technologies to keep our animals healthy. So we've been in constant contact with Iowa Vet Med Association as well as several of you across the state that would represent some of our membership as practicing local large animal veterinarians. So thank you for your input and just keep that input coming. We want to keep that door open. Secondly, and just importantly, in terms of a high priority, a high discussion level, those livestock auction markets that we have scattered across our state that do just a wonderful job. When we talk price discovery, there isn't really a better place to see what cattle are worth than going to that local livestock auction market. Those men and women have been working really hard to not only comply with the human safety component to narrow up this pathogenic pandemic, but also been working with their buyers and sellers to do it in a way that we keep the market going. So continuity of business. In addition to that, we've been working with the Iowa Department of Ag and Land Stewardship on many different levels. But specifically connected to those live auction markets, it is so valuable and so important as we inform the rest of the market in the upper Midwest and Iowa that those market reporters that we pay to go in there and report those feeder calf prices are able to do their job and work forward from there.
Yeah, and I think it's been really encouraging to see from both the state and federal government, affirmation of what we knew already, that agriculture is very important. And as a part of the overall goal of food security for Americans and really worldwide right now, it's very important that we keep these processes going. Move on to livestock haulers. We have an exemption for hours of service, correct? Which is good news. I believe I saw, Matt, something that they should be printing off to keep in their trucks. Is that correct?
Yes, and so if you are a livestock hauler connected to the ag side of the world here, we want to make sure that you have there's a document that you can, in case you get pulled over, that you can show them that I'm exempted because I'm working for the ag industry. I'm hauling livestock, transitioning livestock from place to place. But that was a really positive outcome of last week. About midweek, we started to hear discussions in terms of exemptions on hours of service and distance. And it all goes back to kind of that isolation method, that social distance method. If we get the cattle where they're supposed to be and we get back to where we started from a trucker standpoint, that's also good for human health as well.
How about on the processing side? I know that there are concerns about what would happen if there were to be an outbreak in a processing plant. What are you hearing from the packers and what their plans are if that were to happen?
So about a week ago, that very first weekend where we saw that traumatic box beef spike up and the live cattle prices come down, one of the discussions we initiated that previous Thursday or Friday was with the four larger packers, and the question was, what's going to happen if you have a staff member on the floor wherever that comes down with and is tested positive for COVID-19. So we've done a lot of work, not only with the packing industry to maintain the support they need. We went directly that weekend to the AMS through USDA, who regulates and provides the inspectors that are absolutely imperative to making sure that we get throughput of the live cattle, of the live pork, those types of things. To date, knock on wood, we haven't had that challenge. We've also connected this to the Iowa Department of Ag and Land Stewardship, our governor's office, as well as the Iowa Department of Public Health. And very, very important when we think of agriculture and think about what we need to keep the business going, we also step forward and say, you know what, we're putting food on the plate. And so food security is a big piece of this whole discussion. And that's why agriculture gets to look at how they maintain some continuity of business and will continue to do so working forward.
Yeah, and speaking of putting beef on the plate, we've seen some nice things from our partners at the Beef Checkoff, the Iowa Beef Industry Council. Give us a quick rundown of how they have shifted their strategy based on, consumer behavior changes right now.
That's absolutely right, Katie. So the one thing in a situation like this, when you get federal and state government, sometimes local government, just really focusing in on the message of, hey, keep yourself socially distant from others, as well as isolated to prevent the spread of a disease, so we don't have as much community spread, and we eliminate that pathogen longer term or quicker. And we saw it on the demand side. There's quite a few folks going to the Hy-Vees, Fairways, other grocers, and pulling literally that meat, that animal protein is leaping off the shelves into their cart and going home. So the beef industry, so your checkoff dollars, state and federal checkoff dollars, jumped right into that discussion right off the bat. On the federal side, we've seen the Federation of State Beef Councils redirect funds towards kind of that cooking at home type piece, because we know consumers are stocking up at home, and we know they're stocking up with beef for many different reasons, health and other reasons as well. And so we want to make sure that we have those resources for them. So if you're on Facebook, you're on any type of social media, and you want to get that out there to your friends in the consumer world, other friends in the consumer world, make sure to go to iabeef.org and look that up on how you can best utilize the beef you purchased at the grocer in your household and with your family.
Yeah, I know I am very fortunate to have a freezer full of beef here at home, and I thought about that the other day. That has definitely made this social distancing a little bit easier, and been using those recipes from the Iowa Beef Industry Council to jazz up my normal cooking regimen, if you will. Couple more things. This has been definitely a stressful time for, I think, all Americans, but farmers too, especially with the financial implications of COVID-19. And so, you have any words of wisdom or words of advice for our producers right now?
Yeah, I do think the first thing is just as the rest of the population adapts to being a little more socially distant from others that they usually get with, we need to comply with that same mindset. We've got to produce food. I mean, we've got to maintain some continuity of business working forward, and it's going to be challenging. It's going to be challenging for many of your friends and neighbors, regardless if they're in the beef industry or not. Know that the Iowa Cattlemen's Association is here for you, regardless if you're a dues paying member right now or not. Our interest is for the best interest of Iowa's beef industry. And with that said, we certainly know there's going to be more struggles and challenges to overcome as we work through this historical, monumental pandemic. But we certainly want to be there and work together. So if you have some thoughts in relationship to the disaster funding, if you want to speak up and speak and talk to your senators and eventually your House of Representatives delegate in DC, make sure you give us a call. We'll get you connected right off the bat. If you need some talking points, that's certainly fine. If you need some updates on where the legislation stands, just as importantly, longer term, from an influence standpoint, I think we've made the point. We need to. I don't know if it's fix, enhance, what have you. There needs to be a change to the way our fundamentals work within the live cattle trade. And that starts in the fed market. You have all heard from the Iowa Cattlemen's Association for the last decade of what we're trying to do, what we're working forward on. We're intending to continue that movement forward. And so we need to all work together. And so your input's important, but then when it comes to apply some action, we need to work together forward, us, other states, as we go forward in the name of transparency and price discovery. And then finally, you know what, we've had, and Katie can attest to this, we've had many different phone calls with leadership, groups of specific leaders maybe on or not on our board. And one thing as we wrap things up, I think it's really important. Humans are a very social animal. And so as you kind of think of that and you're isolated yourself, take some time, functionally think forward and say, you know, I haven't talked to such and such lately. Give them a call, send them a message, and vice versa. If you need somebody to call you, just chat them up. We want to make sure that as we go through these struggles in the current and working forward, that we all stick together. But we want to make sure that we do that completely together. And so, speaking and talking and reaching out to folks is so important across our country as we all work through this and as we all work hard as a team to narrow up this COVID-19 issue.
Yeah, very good. It is a stressful time, and we definitely want our producers to know, that as farmers ourselves, we understand what our members are going through, and our staff is here to listen. We've had messages on social media and phone calls, and we have a whole team here that wants to talk to you and wants to provide resources if there's anything we can do to help. I think that we have covered most of the main points here, Matt. Is there anything else that you feel like our Iowa's cattle producers should know right now?
Katie, as we put this together and tried to figure out the technology ourselves, I think one thing to express to those that are listening, this might be a little bit long, those types of things. We try to communicate and get out very transparently what's going on and what we're doing in a lot of different medias. You all know out there sitting there, there's going to be things coming in the magazine in April that we just finished up writing. And we know this is a fluid situation. So if you got any questions, post them on Facebook, send us direct messages. We want to make sure that we get the word out to everyone in regard to what we need to be working on together and what we're hearing in the countryside. And that's all in the name of making sure that our butts stay in the seat in Iowa's beef business working through COVID-19.
That's right. Kind of like we referenced earlier. Yeah, there are some band-aid pieces here, but we're still focused on that cure in the end so that our we can really fulfill our mission, which is to grow Iowa's beef business through advocacy, leadership, and education. If you do not follow us on social media, we are primarily on Facebook. We are also on Twitter. We have been sending daily emails the past about week and a half to our members about what we've been working on. You can go to our website, iacattlemen.org, to sign up for those emails. And also, we've been sending out some text messages. And as always, our phone lines are open, 515-296-2266, or send an email to iacattlemen@iacattlemen.org. We're out there. We want to talk to you. Let us know what your questions are. Let us know if you like this audio version of an update. We're just like everybody else right now, learning how to work remotely and do things a little bit differently in this atmosphere. And so if this works for you and you like it, let us know. We'll try to get more of these audio updates out to you soon.